Hey everyone, welcome back to Mindful English. I'm Sarah, and I'm sitting here with Liam.
Hey everyone. You know, Sarah, I was reading an article the other day about sports psychology, specifically about how elite athletes perform under extreme pressure. It made a fascinating point. When a professional tennis player is facing a 120 mile per hour serve, they are absolutely not thinking. If they consciously thought, okay, bend my knees, rotate my shoulder, snap my wrist, the ball would already be past them. Their conscious brain is too slow. They survive entirely on muscle memory.
Exactly. They don't build the movement in real time. They just react. Their body completely takes over because they've done the exact same physical movement 10,000 times in practice.
Right. And reading that article instantly made me think of the conversations we have here about language learning. Because it feels like most English learners are doing the exact opposite of that athlete. We step onto the court, someone asks us a question, and we desperately try to consciously calculate every single angle before we hit the ball back.
We really do. And Liam, I am so glad you brought up that sports analogy because it took me years of agonizing failure to finally understand that concept. For the longest time, I completely misunderstood what speaking actually was. I treated English like a math test. I thought if I just memorized enough individual vocabulary words and perfected the grammar rules in my head, I would naturally become fluent.
That is the academic trap. You had all the data in your head. But what happened when you actually tried to use it in the real world?
It was a total disaster. I would sit in a cafe with a native speaker, and I sounded like a broken robot. Because I was trying to manually construct sentences from scratch, I was constantly getting completely bogged down in the details of the grammar. I would pause after every single word, desperately trying to search my mental dictionary for the next perfect vocabulary word, and then trying to quickly calculate the tense to connect them.
And when you are doing that much heavy lifting in your brain, you get mentally exhausted so fast. You completely burn out after just 10 minutes of talking.
I did. It was exhausting. And the worst part was the shame. I knew the words, but I just couldn't string together a natural sentence fast enough. If the native speaker talked at a normal pace, I couldn't keep up with them. I would panic. My tongue would literally tie itself in knots, and I would constantly trip up over the most basic sounds. I would try to force the sentence out, but I could barely spit out half of what I actually wanted to say.
It's such a helpless feeling. Your brain is smart, but your mouth is completely betraying you. So, how did you finally break out of that robotic phase? What changed?
I started to really analyze how native speakers actually talked, and I had a massive realization that completely changed my trajectory. I noticed that English is not a collection of individual words. English is a song. It is entirely about rhythm, melody, and linked sounds. Native speakers do not speak word by word. They speak in connected, physical chunks. When a native speaker says, "What are you going to do?" they aren't accessing 6 separate files in their brain. They say one continuous physical sound. What you gonna do?
That is such a crucial distinction. If you learn what are you going to and do as separate dictionary words, your mouth will never be able to physically connect them fast enough in real life. Your brain simply cannot process that much data in real time.
Exactly. Trying to build a sentence word by word during a conversation is cognitive overload. It's exactly like the tennis player trying to calculate the physics of their swing while the ball is flying at their face. You will fail every single time. So I realized I had to completely overhaul my training. I threw away my single-word vocabulary flashcards. I stopped obsessing over whether my individual vowel sounds were academically perfect. Instead, I started treating my mouth like an athlete's muscles. I realized that my mouth had to memorize the movement of entire phrases, not the definitions of isolated words.
You shifted from being a dictionary to being an athlete. So, what did that actual physical training look like? How do you train your mouth to remember a whole phrase?
It's all about physical, out-loud repetition of high-value chunks. I would take a very common conversational phrase. For example, "To be honest with you." Instead of analyzing the grammar of that sentence, I just accepted it as one giant, single vocabulary word. I would stand in front of my mirror, entirely alone, and physically say that entire phrase out loud 50 times. To be honest with you. To be honest with you. I would exaggerate my mouth movements to really iron out the rigid, inflexible habits of my native language. I wasn't testing my memory. I was building muscle memory in my jaw, my lips, and my tongue.
You were doing reps. You were physically building the neural pathways between your brain and your mouth. You wanted a physical reflex that you could fall back on when you got nervous in a real conversation.
Yes, I was taking the heavy lifting out of my anxious brain and giving it to my muscles. And Liam, this is where the magic finally happened. A few weeks after I started doing this, I was at a dinner party. Someone asked me a slightly controversial question about a movie, and before my brain even had time to translate anything or calculate the grammar, I just looked at them and naturally blurted out, "Well, to be honest with you." My brain didn't calculate it. My mouth just did it. The physical training finally started to kick in. Because I had practiced the whole phrase as one single physical movement, my mouth was able to effortlessly rattle off the entire sentence in one smooth breath.
That is the absolute holy grail of fluency right there. You bypassed the conscious, anxious brain entirely. And Sarah, listening to you tell this story, it is the exact reason why we built this channel the way we did.
It is the entire foundation of Mindful English. That is exactly why we never just sit here and lecture you about grammar rules. It is why every single episode is built around teaching you specific, natural phrases. We want to give you the exact chunks of language you need to build your muscle memory.
Right. And it is why we do the mindful review at the end of every episode. And more importantly, it is why we take the time to create a free practice worksheet and pin it in the comments for you every single week. We don't just want you to passively listen to us. We want you to physically train.
Exactly. You have to put in the physical reps. We highly encourage you to intentionally carve out just 15 minutes a day for your English workout. Go to the comments, print out the worksheet we made for you, and physically read those example sentences out loud. Say them until your jaw is tired.
And don't just stop at today's episode. Go back and listen to our older episodes, grab those worksheets, and run through those phrases again. If you just stick with this daily physical training, you will completely transform the way you speak.
You will. The language will stop feeling like a terrifying math test, and it will finally start to feel like a reflex.
That is so incredibly liberating. So, before we wrap up, let's quickly jump into our mindful review and unpack the exact phrases we used today so our listeners can practice them.
Let's do a rapid-fire review. Liam, let's talk about the frustration of translating. I mentioned getting bogged down in the details.
Right. To get bogged down means you are stuck in the mud. You can't move forward. And because you are stuck, you mentally burn out. You just get completely exhausted from the effort.
Exactly. And when you are burnt out, you can't string together a natural sentence. You physically can't connect the words quickly enough.
Which makes it impossible to keep up with native speakers. You just can't match their speed in a conversation.
And when you panic trying to match their speed, your tongue will literally trip up over basic sounds. You stumble like you hit a rock.
And you end up struggling to just spit out half of what you wanted to say. To spit out means forcing the words out with great physical difficulty.
But the solution is that physical training. I had to practice in the mirror to iron out those mistakes. Just like ironing a wrinkled shirt, you are smoothing out the rough edges of your pronunciation.
Because you needed muscle memory to fall back on when you panicked. You needed a reliable backup plan that your body remembered.
Yes, and when that training finally starts to kick in, meaning it takes effect automatically, everything changes.
Instead of overthinking, you just naturally blurt out the answer. You say it automatically, without planning it.
And eventually, you can effortlessly rattle off an entire sentence in one breath, just saying it quickly and easily from memory.
Which brings us to how our listeners can do this today. You have to intentionally carve out time in your busy schedule. Just 10 or 15 minutes.
Go to the comments, print out the free worksheet we made, and physically read it out loud.
And don't just do today's episode. Run through the older episodes to review those phrases too. Rehearse them from start to finish.
And if you just stick with this daily habit, if you don't quit, you will see massive results. We covered 15 incredible phrases today, all woven into that one conversation.
You stop overthinking, you put in the physical reps, and you let your muscles do the talking.
Your absolute most important next step right now is to scroll down to the comments. Grab today's free worksheet, carve out 10 minutes, and start doing your physical reps out loud.
And while you were down there, tell us, what is one old episode of ours you're going to run through again this week to review your phrases? Take care of yourselves, everyone. Have a great workout.
See you next time. Bye.